Hi guys, in today's episode I'm going to be making a dungeon entrance, specifically a mine. So to start with, going to grab some foam core and going to cut an oval out of it, and then we're going to go around and bevel the edges. Ideally, you want to bevel it enough so that you don't get that kind of hard top edge coming through from the top layer of the paper on the foam core. Then, using some other bits of foam core, going to mock up the size of the entrance. And it helps to use something you have in scale so you get the size right. And this foam core will act as a framework that we can use to build the rock up around it. And adding another piece on the back. So the more foam core used at this stage, the less styrofoam you have to use later. And then cutting some chunks of styrofoam, just going to glue them around the entrance. And we will be shaping these later so they can be blocky. It's a great time to use any offcuts you had. This was the last bit of a block of styrofoam I had, so I had to order some new stuff and use up the last little bit I had of this one. So then, to get rid of some of the blockiness, we're going to go around with a knife again and just smooth out some of the edges, get rid of any of the kind of 90-degree angles, and add some more glue to support, and just make it all a bit smooth. It doesn't matter if there's some kind of blockiness to it, because some rocks are naturally like that, but generally you want the entire thing to be a bit more rounded. Or not, maybe. And then, using little bits of offcuts, we're going to glue them back into the holes. And we will be filling the gaps later, but it helps to have something solid between them as well. And double checking the scale is still right. Now we want to go in with a tinfoil ball, and we want to add some stone texture onto all the styrofoam. And we can also use it to further bevel and compress the edges, and kind of blend the rocks into each other. I also went in with a sculpting tool and added some cracks and crevices to the back rocks where they were all still quite uniform. And then with some lengths of balsa wood, going to build up the entrance to the mine shaft. And again, this is a great one to use up any kind of spare leftover bits of balsa wood. You have lots of bits of broken timber and supports lying around. And then cutting a few more lengths to make some beams later that will be covering the entrance to the cavern. Now, if you want it to be a functioning mine, then you probably don't want those. And then gluing some more bits of the scrap styrofoam just around the base. and anything that you cut of the project can be stuck right back on the base. And then going in again and smoothing out again with a tinfoil ball. And another small offcut on top to fill some of that gap and get rid of that kind of flat surface. Now I took some plasticard, made a kind of half wheelbarrow, and I'm just going to glue that to the front, be some kind of old abandoned rusty mining equipment. And then with a few more bits of balsa timber, going to stick them around the base, be kind of broken beams, interior supports, all that kind of jazz. I then realised the base was too small, so I got some more foam core, beveled the edge, and then glued the entire thing on top of that. This also helps in giving it a bit more height variation, and makes it look a bit more hilly. And then even more balsa to add a bit more kind of structure to the front of the mine. Then, with 1 scoop of sculptor mold and 1 scoop of water, I'm going to mix that up into a slurry and apply that all over the gaps and the base. And we're going to use that to blend the rocks into the base, as well as hide any terrible mistakes we made along the way. And then, while the sculptor mold is still wet and drying, we're going to make some rocks and attach them onto the base. Again, just kind of pulling apart with our fingers or a knife, and then going over with a tinfoil board to add some texture. And then while it's still wet, we can blend it onto the base with a sculpting tool. And if these do come out later, you can just reattach them with a bit of hot glue. There should still be the impression left from the sculptor mold. Next, we're going to make some basing grit. So mixing coarse cork and a fine cork with PVA and a little bit of water this time to make it flow better. And a few scoopfuls of gesso as well, just to pre-color it. And if you can, mix it in fast forward. Saves a lot of time. And then we're going to scoop it all over the base. And anywhere we have sculptor mold, we probably want to slap some basing paste and a bit of overlap onto the wheelbarrow and the rock bases. Now I'm leaving the inside of the mine empty, but you could stick a tea light or something in there. But it's going to be covered by some of the planks and pretty dark anyway, so you won't be able to see it very far. And then, while that paste is still drying, we're going to sprinkle some gravel onto it. And then you want to pat it down with the side of a sculpting tool, just to get it a bit more securely attached. And then do the same with some slightly larger rocks. Just strategically plop them down, give them a poke with your finger. And then it's time to prime the entire thing in black gesso. Now this is where it really helps having the pre-coloured basing paste. So it's just a bit more forgiving on trying to paint the textured sections where it's slightly harder to get into the crevices. we're going to paint the entire thing with a base coat of brown. Just plain brown. And it does matter if you miss a few black bits in the crevices, that just adds some natural shadow. So you can see on the base and grip, probably not going to get full coverage on there. That's fine. Then, mixing up some more of the same brown, but with a lot more white, we're going to make a kind of tan colour, and go in again. And again, doesn't matter if you don't get full coverage, you just want to pick out all the details. And you want to use a slightly knackered old brush for this because it will take a toll on the bristles. That seems to be true whenever you're painting anything with texture. Then, with some gunmetal, we're going to go in and paint the wheelbarrow thing. And we will be adding some rust to that later. And then adding a tiny bit of black to mostly white, we're going to make a very light grey and go over the rocks where they're particularly prevalent. So the larger rocks on the base, as well as some of the larger ones making up the mine itself. And you might want to water it down a little bit for this, just to give a kind of grey tone to it rather than completely covering it, like I do on the side of the rock here. And it doesn't matter if you can't get the same grey colour twice in a row. There are a lot of differences in lighting and rocks, even when they're right next to each other. Then mixing up some more white and brown to make the tan sand colour again, but we want to make it even brighter this time. And going to go over the details, hit them all again, and blend the grey and the brown back together. And if you go too heavy, you can wipe it off with your finger. So just going around, continue to blend the colours together. And hitting the top level of detail. Next, we're going to add some static grass, so with some watered down PVA, we're going to paint that onto the base. Then, once we've got a good layer of patchy PVA, we're going to get out the applicator and apply static grass on top. And make sure you are careful that you don't connect the point to the mesh and that you don't activate the tool while the contact point is resting on your knee. It is always surprising how much of a kick 2 AA batteries have when you're not expecting it. And then shake off the excess and store it again for later. Or if it's a bit patchy, wait until it's dry, put some more PVA on top of the glue, and apply a second layer, and that will look like a much fuller area of grass. Then, mixing up some clump foliage, grind it up with a hand grinder, and some PVA, we're going to apply that kind of mushy foliage paste around the entrance of the mine. So this was the regular comp foliage I normally use, but blended up for a few seconds and then mixed with PVA. And you get this very kind of malleable, mushy paste. And just applying it around the base to be some kind of low-level plants or shrubbage. Now, there was something I wanted to try on the back of the rock here, so I got some Vallejo water gel and a sculpting tool, and I pushed a crack into the back of the styrofoam and put the water paste over the top. And I want to try and see how that comes out to make a metallic ore vein that's visible in the back. Then, grabbing the 2 planks we put aside earlier, going to put some PVA on them and attach them to the front of the mine. One of these I broke in two to become a broken plank, and put each one on either side as if something's either kicked in or kicked out of the inside. So, with the water paste dried, we're going to take some metallic paint and dab over where the gel has made it really glossy. And then we're going to weather everything with a bit of orangey brown paint on the metallics. So on the wheelbarrow in the front, just going to dab that all over and wash it down a little bit so you get a kind of blotchy coverage. And then as well on the metallic vein to represent that kind of oxidization. And the dirt you get attached to kind of open metallic veins. Then using some dark brown paint to patch up some of the plank work. And I also had these old kind of glass gems, which I believe are used for smelting glass, and just picked 2 of them and put them in the wheelbarrow to be kind of uncut emeralds or gems that have been left and abandoned. Then going around with some grass tufts, just going to add a few finishing touches. So I've got some kind of shrubbier ones that I put around the front. And a clump of dead grass just to sit next to the wheelbarrow. Then mixing up some very watered down green paint so that it's almost translucent, going to go and hit the planks with a very light wash of it, just to make them look a little bit rotting and damp. And then letting that dry, and then hitting it with another layer, just to kind of make it a little bit blotchy, and have some variance in the planks. I then glued 2 cocktail sticks together, and took some paper, dipped it in watered down PVA I had left over, and moulded it into a flag shape to make a little banner. Then gave it a coating of black paint. And you want to be a little bit careful because the paper will kind of soften up again as it gets wet. Then doing a very simple colour scheme of red on the banner and dark brown for the post. And then, when we no longer needed the base of the banner, just snipped it off. Then that can be added and removed as needed. And now we only need a guinea for comparison. And there we go. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.